Hey, welcome to the Tatuakua Book Club. Tonight we have special guest Paulette, and she was the or is an advisor for the National Jericho. Is it foundation or movement? And she was also previously she was a director for the International Leonard Peltier Defense Committee. Welcome, Paulette. It's good to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you. Actually, I was with Bob Robidoux in Kansas when Leonard was at Leavenworth, where Samuel was at. Bob and I ran the office with David Hill. And so we've done this off and on for, it seems like our whole life. I mean, I met Leonard in 1972 when he was headed to the Trail of Broken Treaties. And I lived in Chicago, and we had a big fundraiser, and Leonard came and we all hung out and talked and had a great time and gave him some money, and him and the caravan, because they were in the Menominee takeover prior to that. And so Leonard went on, and so I've known him, like Leonard and I say, we've known each other 50 years. And so that makes us in our early teens when we met. But I really
still look like a teenager.
Yeah, we were supposed to have read chapters 10 and 11. And I wanted to talk about the two women who have been instrumental, one in Leonard's extradition, and the other one in the result of her murder, has cost Leonard dearly in the northern tiers of the United States and Canada. And of course, that's Annie Mae Aquash. And the other one is Myrtle Forebear. Now, I knew Annie Mae, and in there it talks about Annie Mae being in Los Angeles and Ernie Peters and having a sweat. And so I first met Ernie when he did Skyhorse Mohawk trials. And if you wanted to be on the defense committee, you were introduced to the Sweat Lodge, because he said that was the way you had honesty and you didn't have infiltrators. If people were willing to go to the sweat for 4 rounds, he felt that that was a way of showing your support if you were a non-native person, and respect for not only Leonard and Indian people, but for the sacredness of their pipe, which gets smoked in the 4th round. So Annie Mae plays a very mixed role in the early part of that chapter. She comes from Nova Scotia. She's at Wounded Knee. She marries Nogechi, and she's married to him for about a year. And then she breaks off from Nogechi, and she becomes involved in women's and children's work on Pine Ridge. At the same time, she becomes involved with Dennis Banks. And the role that she plays in that part of her life and his life is that she is his mistress. And that causes all kinds of problems for her, because the Lakota women found it very upsetting that he was married to Kamuk, who was this young Indian woman who had already had 2 of his children. And at the same time, he was very open about his relationship with Annie Mae. Annie Mae was a wonderful person. Bob knew Annie Mae and Leonard. And in New Mexico at the Indian Treaty Council, some people told Kamuk that Annie Mae was in a relationship with Dennis. And that sort of set the role for Kamuk as she becomes more and more upset about this. she eventually becomes the person that calls everybody and says, oh, remember this, that, and the other thing, and she records them. And then after Leonard is captured, she's used in John Boy's trial to say that Leonard told her he had killed the agents. She and her sister Bernie both testifies to this at both Arlo and at John Boy's trial. So her relationship is, and she's now married to a former goon and lives on Pine Ridge. But Annie Mae was also a very interesting woman who did a lot of very good work. So it's always hard to try and separate her role politically as an Indian woman from her relationship, because politically, she did a lot of work with young Indian women around education. She did a lot of work around medical care for women. And she traveled extensively with Dennis, but also with Leonard and Bob. And all of them had a lot of respect for Annie Mae. And Bob never, and neither does Leonard, ever feel that Annie Mae was an agent. But because of, as you read in that chapter, the relationship the FBI played with her and their attempt to discredit her, and the fact that she's been able to not be charged with some things that other Indian people were charged with, she started to get a snitch jacket on her, until at the end, it's quite evident when she comes to California, she tells Ernie that she's afraid to go back to South Dakota because she fears for her life. And so John Trudell, who was her very best friend, was supposed to be taking care of Annie Mae, and somewhere along the line, their relationship gets fractured, and she's sort of on her own when she's taken from Denver, Colorado to Rapid City, then to Women's Council in Pine Ridge, and then she's assassinated. And so her role plays a very mixed bag. There's a book called Annie Mae, Brave-Hearted Woman by Brand, which goes into more detail, a more personalized view of Annie Mae than you get in The Spirit of Crazy Horse. There she plays a peripheral figure, always in the mix, but never sort of on the inner circles until the Oregon events. But if you get a chance to read it, it's called Brave-Hearted Woman, the story of Annie Mae Aquash by Brand, B-R-A-N-D. It's wonderful, and you see her as having multiple relationships and roles, just like most people do in the movement. You know, with some people, they're your comrades, and other people, they're just friends. And so Annie Mae played a different role with the elders than she did with the young Lakota women, than she did with Bob and Dino and Leonard. So she's a complicated woman, but in another way, she's very easy to understand, in that her struggle for the people, and whether it was in Nova Scotia or whether it was on Pine Ridge, there can be no question that she was totally committed to Indian people. But like all of us, she's a human being, and I guess the heart wanted what the heart wanted, and she was willing to sacrifice her reputation to be with Dennis, because Dennis does not play a good role. I mean, there for a while, Dennis is sort of on the fence about her being an agent. Later on, he comes out and said, well, I never really said that, but his actions when he and none of the other AIM leadership went to her funeral, was very clear as to how she was seen. She was buried primarily by women. That's who she supported, and that who protected her, and that's who ended up burying her. So she plays that role. And of course, she wrote to her sisters and she told them what was going on, and they begged her to please come back to Canada, that the AIM in the United States was too deadly. And after she's killed and they cut off her hands, and then they find out who she is and she's reburied, her daughters become very upset with the AIM leadership because nobody is willing to sort of put to rest what happened to her. And over the years, both of her daughters have put out some pretty horrifying things about Leonard. When John Boy was arrested, Leonard made a statement that he did not think another AIM man should go to prison for something he didn't do. And they took that to mean that he was defending John Boy. And ever since then, they have spoken out against Leonard. They have organized against Leonard. The Dreebers have a huge gathering in February on the day Leonard was captured up at Little Boys. And I've been at it 2 or 3 or 4 years. And when you first went, it was huge. There were hundreds of people that would come. And the last time I went, there wasn't 100 people there at all. And it was all because they said, you know, they couldn't support Leonard because as women, they felt that he had not acted appropriately as a warrior and stood up for Annie Mae and called AIM male leadership into question. And so there's been a couple of tribunals around murdered and missing Indian women in Canada. And both of her daughters have testified holding a pipe as to how they feel Leonard acted and why they feel that if he was AIM, and AIM is a spiritual movement, that he should have been willing to stand up and, you know, be strong for Annie Mae, and they felt he hasn't. And that has cut into a lot of his support within Indian women and women in general in Canada. Some of the northern tiers when I lived in North Dakota, you would hear that a lot. Well, you know, if he'd have just defended Annie Mae, but he wouldn't, he just stuck with the men, and you know how these men stick together. And so it's cost him a lot of support. And the person that has spoken to both of the sisters most diligently is Jean Roach, who was there, you know, of course, at the shootout. She knew Annie Mae. You know, even though she was a teenager, she lived off and on at the camp. And so she's taken it on to, you know, speak with them about this and defended Leonard to the point where now it becomes detrimental to try and have an argument rather than, because they're, I mean, it's their mother, they're not forgiving. They believed AIM was responsible for her death, and AIM leadership should have had more respect for her. So the women, while they were upset, are still the ones that took care of her and buried her. Yes, Dawn?
Wasn't it AIM that asked for the second autopsy?
Her family got in touch with Bruce, and Bruce asked for the second autopsy. It was, I mean, I think one of the Meanses was there as well, but it was actually her family that requested the second autopsy. And Bruce was the one that filed the papers to have her exhumed and the second autopsy to take place. So,
Could you clarify who Bruce is for the people who don't know?
oh yeah, Bruce Ellison was a young attorney at the time of Bob and Dino's trial. And then he was also part of Leonard's trial and has been probably the key lawyer for Leonard for the last, well, since he was indicted. And Bruce lives in South Dakota. Bruce has a brain tumor now. So he doesn't do much traveling. But he still is a wonderful consultant. If you have questions on little itsy bitsy pieces of the law, Bruce is the one to get a hold of. Most of us don't bother Bruce unless it's really something major, because you just don't know how long it's going to be. It's it's malignant, but it's not. It grows, but it's not a malignant tumor. Yeah, Dawn.
Sorry, I can't put my hand up because I'm the host.
I see you.
When I hear people parrot Clement's testimony, she was paid $43,000 for that testimony. And it was all here's the evidence. Nobody else heard her say it. The attorneys of that trial repeatedly said Leonard Peltier is not on trial, but they said goes to state of mind. I tell them that Agent Price told her if she did not testify against Leonard, he would see her dead within a year. 2 weeks before she died, she confided to her attorney that she would be murdered soon and that it would be on the FBI. When Price found her, he cut off her hands and had her quickly buried as a Jane Doe. He knew who she was. He had arrested her twice.
Right.
So how would you go about defending Leonard to these people that say Leonard killed Anna Mae? I mean, how could he stand up for her being in prison?
Well, I don't think anybody says that Leonard killed her. What they say is Leonard is part of AIM leadership, and you have to realize that Leonard wasn't part of AIM leadership. Leonard was Dennis Banks's bodyguard. He ran with them like Bob was Russell Means's bodyguard. But as far as being part of the inner circle, it was Dennis and the Bell Courts, people out of Wisconsin, you know, a very select grouping of early Aimsters who had the leadership roles and maintained it. But Leonard played a crucial role in that, which was the Robidoux and Peltier family, never had any infiltrators, and they were known to be the straight shooters. They were the people that you couldn't corrupt, that if they were given an assignment, they took care of it and they did it, and they were respected. And so through Leonard's work was how he became put into this role. And so Leonard is the one that they can see. Leonard is the one that had the relationship. I mean, there's a wonderful movie out there too called Bravehearted Women. And in it, Leonard talks about they all went to a ceremony, and afterwards they had this wonderful dinner. And on the way back, he and Annie Mae are walking back to camp, and she said, "Oh, that was a great beef stew." And he says to her, "Oh no, Annie Mae, that was puppy stew." And Annie Mae goes, "Oh my God," you know, and he said, Annie Mae's eyes got just big, and he said, "You know, my sister," he said, "you know, what can I tell you? It's a Lakota custom." So because of that, because people knew that she had the respect of Northwest AIM and everything, was one of the reasons they were so upset that none of those men stood up to defend her or to protect her. Bob and Dino were already in the Pennington County Jail when Annie Mae was killed, and Leonard was in Canada. So none of the three of them had anything to do with any part of that AIM attempt to discredit her or to end her life or whatever you want to say. But because of who they were and their relationship to her, it got pulled in, and Leonard sort of bore the brunt of it. And Bob and Dino have always said, you know, that Leonard and I, whether it was Bob talking or Dino, had the utmost respect for Annie Mae, and we offered her a role in Northwest AIM. And she said, no, she wanted to go back to Pine Ridge, that's where she was comfortable. She knew the women and everything. And they warned her, you know, well, you need to pay attention and, you know, see what's going on. And it just went downhill after Doug Durham is exposed. Annie Mae is part of the group that exposes Doug Durham, who was Dennis's bodyguard for a while. He had a plane, he flew Dennis every place. And he was an FBI informant and became a member of the John Birch Society and went around the country speaking about Leonard and AIM as this terrorist organization and stuff like that. So, you know, it was very hard when you isolate yourself in some ways by her relationship with Dennis to have people have your back when you grew up with Kamuk and everything. So, you know, that was her decision, and she was willing to allow it to happen and to be part of it, and made no bones about her relationship, even though they traveled together, she and Annie Mae, I mean, Kamuk and Bernie and Annie Mae all traveled with Dennis and Bob, not Bob, but Dennis and Leonard, you know, going to Oregon. So it's complicated, but at the same time, you know, once you make these decisions and you're on this path, and once she was on the path, she didn't want to change. So part of that, of course, is bringing consequences on yourself. Yes. I see you, Dawn.
I think it's important to note that she was on Leonard's defense witness list when she was murdered. And they had her in a room for hours, telling her that if she, Annie Mae, they had her in a
Annie
room.
Mae was already dead. Annie Mae was dead. You're talking about the Oregon trial. That's the Oregon trial, not the Fargo trial. That's with Dennis and Redner and Loudhawk.
But
that was on that trial. Even though Annie Mae was dead, they left her on as a witness. But that was the Oregon trial. That wasn't the Fargo trial.
Thank you for the clarification, Paulette.
Yeah, thank you, Paulette.
Yeah.
Kim had her hand up.
Well, she already answered my question. So sorry about that.
So, and of course, Leonard never stood trial in Oregon either. But Russ and Dennis and Kenny Loudhawk. And of course, Kamuk was sent back to prison because she was out on a bond. And Annie Mae was sent back to South Dakota because she was on a bond as well. And then Kamuk has her second daughter, Iron Door woman, when she's in prison.
How long was Kamuk in prison for?
I think she did maybe less than a year.
And that was for what happened in Oregon or for?
No, Oregon.
Okay.
Because she was on parole, like from a thing, and if she was well, if you get in trouble, you know, they revoke you and send you back, and so she was revoked and sent back to prison.
Welcome, David. Welcome, David. David just signed on.
Welcome, Mr. David Hill.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
What else, Todd?
everything that Kamuk said during that testimony has been disproven. She said a lot of
Right.
stuff about being held hostage in Marlon Brando's RV, and there were people there that said that she came and went as she pleased, that she was on good terms with Leonard right up until the time he left for Canada.
Right. Yeah, Leonard and Annie, Kamuk and Bernie all hung out together with Bob and Bob's wife, Andrea Sky, who's from Cheyenne River. They all hung out together when they were on Pine Ridge. You know, stood up for them and took care of them and everything. So, yes. But, you know, she fell the green-eyed monster of jealousy, tore up her relationship. But even then, Dennis has never said anything about that. He's never said she was wrong, or he said that's the mother of my children, and she made those decisions. And so he's never chastised her for, you know, lying or anything, you know, and why she wasn't brought up on perjury is not known. But of course, she said it was just her and Bernie and Leonard. And so Leonard didn't get to testify, and she and Bernie testified to the same thing. Dawn.
It could have been the fact that she's married to the investigator. Can I
Right,
take
but
just
she
a
wasn't
moment to
married to-
introduce David to
Right.
Samuel? Samuel did time with Leonard.
He was in Leavenworth with Leonard.
David has
David,
had
did you
Leonard's
hear?
back for a very long time.
Mhm.
Okay, back to you, Paulette. I'm sorry.
Okay, so that's the role that Annie Mae plays. Now, the second woman we also meet is Myrtle Poorbear. And Myrtle Poorbear is was a young Lakota woman who was mentally challenged, extremely challenged. And she was used by the FBI in both Dickie Marshall's case and in Leonard's case. And she was the one that testified and ended up getting Dickie Marshall convicted. But with Leonard's case, Leonard was in Canada and fighting extradition. And she becomes the voice that the FBI uses to say that Leonard had told her that, first of all, I mean, one of them is totally amazing. If you go online, you can read all four of her affidavits. And one of them, she's riding this horse. She jumps on Leonard's back and then jumps on this horse and rides out of camp. But the one they use is just a straight up that she was his girlfriend and she was with him and she saw him shoot the agents. And
Right.
the
Also-
FBI says, you know, we don't care if it was a lie or not. We got Leonard back with that, and that's what we wanted. So if it's a lie, too bad, but it got us what we wanted, and so that's why we did it. And that's exactly why they did that. Now, when Leonard's on trial, the prosecution decides not to call her because they realize that she is mentally imbalanced and unstable. And so the defense calls her and they have this hearing just before the judge and the defendant and the prosecution. And she cries a lot of the time. And the judge asked her, do you know Leonard Peltier? And she said, no, I've never met him. She said, they told me that if I didn't say what they wanted, that I was going to end up like Annie Mae, and they were going to take my daughter from me. She had a little 6-year-old daughter at the time of Leonard's trial, 6 or 7 years old. And She
It's
went
my under-
along with it.
It's my understanding, Paulette, that they also showed her pictures of Annie Mae dead. And
Right, and her
Yeah.
hands. Well, I mean, that's what I mean, you know, they showed, when they said that, that's what they
Yeah.
did, was put the picture not only of Annie Mae dead, but of Annie Mae's hands. Hands that were cut
Yeah.
off.
Cut the hands off.
Really?
And
Huh?
they also, like, just to go back over the part about the threat of having your child taken, that's a very real threat, even to this day, for a Native woman, because of, I mean, it goes back throughout history, from the boarding schools to the, what was it called, in Canada? They called it, where they rounded up all the children and just took them away. I can't think
Right,
of, and then also today with CPS, it's an ongoing threat. So I mean, for her, that was a very real threat. And just to take
right,
advantage.
and not only that, but just think, if you're balanced and if you know what's going on and you can make a decision. But here, this woman was totally terrified. They kept her in this motel, and she was already retarded or challenged. You know, she had about a 4th or 5th grade education. So to tell her she was going to lose her daughter, much less that she could end up dead, was, you know, a horrifying experience for somebody who's able to think and say, well, no, that's not going to happen. And if you can't, then that's what it is. Kimberly?
Also, another thing was, didn't they use her in another a murder case as a witness? I mean, and what are the chances of being a witness to two things? I mean, it was.
Well, she was the girlfriend to both of them. One was Richard Marshall, and the other one was Leonard. And in Richard's case, she's becomes the deciding factor of getting him convicted. Is he still in prison, David?
I don't know. I doubt it.
He got a life sentence, but I don't know if they ever appealed it and it got overturned or anything.
What was he convicted of?
That shootout in Scenic, in the bar in Scenic, the man
yeah,
that was
yeah.
killed with
Yeah.
Russell.
I think he got out.
Oh. Okay, so, but you can see that what that happened. And so when she's on the stand, she testified, tells the judge, you know, I didn't know him. I've never seen him until I came into court. And there's Ann Drever. Hi, Ann.
Welcome, Anne. It's a pleasure to have you here.
And so the judge says, you know, I'm not going to allow her to testify because it would do nothing but confuse the jury. And so rather than let them hear what had happened to Myrtle and what they had done in order to get these affidavits, the judge refuses to let her testify. And also Bob and Dino were up in Fargo and were waiting to testify for Leonard, but were never called, and they could never understand why Tagoff didn't call them to testify, because of course they had been acquitted on the grounds of self-defense. And they felt if they testified, it would in fact put Leonard in the same camp with them. And if all three of them were charged with the same thing, then Leonard should be acquitted the same way they were. And so by not allowing Bob and Dino to testify, it kept two powerful voices from speaking up for Leonard. David, do you have anything to add about Annie Mae or anything?
Well, I met her briefly, and at the time that I met her, she was totally trusted and accepted, and there was no hint or anything of any suspicion about her whatsoever.
You're
So
talking
those
about
stories
Annie
were-
Mae?
Yeah, Annie Mae. They
Oh.
treated her, you know, there was nothing, and I hadn't met her before, and nobody told me, said, watch out for her or anything. You know, there was no mistrust of her whatsoever. And, you know, there was, if anything had happened, they would have definitely taken up for her in any way possible.
Dawn?
Something
Oh.
she said just a few days before she died was remember me when it rains. She told her friends, remember me when it rains.
She
Price
told
is
that to
after
John
me and I'm gonna
Trudell.
die. Mhm.
She told
And
that to
I
John
do.
Trudell.
Yeah, I do. When it rains, I think of Annie Mae. Does anybody have any questions for Paulette?
Anything else about those 2 chapters? Did everybody see how the FBI used, and not only that, but were able to capture him? Somebody supposedly snitched on Leonard and told the Mounties where he was at. And he was up there with the man named Black Horse, who has, to this day, I believe, is still hiding out someplace in Canada, but has never come back to do anything for Leonard. And so the Mounties come in and they capture him at Little Boy's, Small Boy, Little Boy?
Small boy camp, I think it's called.
Yeah, Small Boy Camp. And then that was on February 6th. And then he goes to trial within a year after that.
I wanted to again introduce Samuel Kelly. He's, if he wants to unmute himself, he's a friend of Leonard's. And if you could talk a little bit about how you knew him. And
Yes, everyone. My name is Samuel Kelly. I've been a friend of Leonard since 1999. We were in prison together. I also had a life sentence with no possibility of corrupt parole. I was recently released in December 3rd, 2021. So I've been home a little over a year and a half, almost about a year and a half now. And I can tell everybody that everything a lot of people hear about Leonard, the kind of man he is, to be with him on a day-to-day basis. We were in the same unit, a few cells apart. And he's a man of honor. And you don't meet too many people like Leonard. And like I was incarcerated for 27 years. And I can count on one hand the men that I know with the same caliber as Leonard Peltier. And I say he's a man of honor. He should have been home. I remember, I think it was in '99 when Clinton was supposed to pardon him. And we were sitting in the unit and he's like, man, they call me Tiz. He said, Tiz, it's gonna happen. We'll be out of here. We put together a little party for him and everything. And we anticipated, and then when Clinton reneged on it, we all felt that pain. Because when you're in prison doing that type of time, it's a different than doing a 20-year bid or a 30-year bid, because at the end, on such and such a day, you're coming home. But when you have life without parole, that means you're coming home in a coffin. So when we find or hear that one of our comrades is going home, it's a big thing. It's like all of us is going home. A part of every one of us is going home. When I came home, I got salutes from people from so many different penitentiaries. And I didn't even know how fast that my name traveled through all the prisons that I was coming home. And I tell everybody, and even to the day, I say, I'm out here fighting for the guys who are still behind, because I can never turn my back on any of my comrades, because I know whether it was Leonard, whether Suriati, whether it was Matula Secure, that they would always be fighting to help me come out. So it's my duty and my honor to stand in Leonard's place and to help him in any type of way to be released from federal prison. Because no man should have to have done the time that he has already done, no matter what the crime is, whether the person did the crime or not. I've been in prison and I've seen dudes with murders, multiple murders, go home, come back, go home again. And most of them probably deserve to be where they were at. But when you have a person like Leonard who don't deserve to be where he's at, who has honor, integrity, and believes in his people and believes in the cause of helping and standing for his people, those are the ones who should be out there. And everyone who stands, whether they write a letter.
Paulette and David Hill and everyone, and you're under your fucking name.
Excuse me?
I can't figure out who's talking.
That sound like Frank.
Who's
Hey,
Frank?
Ann, is Frank with you? Ann Drevers, is Frank with you?
Colette, it's Ann. How are you doing?
Hi, who am I speaking
Go
to?
ahead, Samuel. Whatever it was, it's gone.
All right.
Welcome
Well-
home, my friend.
I just want to say that, you know, Leonard deserves to be home with his family and his loved one, his community, his people. And anything I could do, I'm going to do to help him. Because I know he would do that for me and for everyone else who are political prisoners. And I wasn't a political prisoner. But he embraced me because of my character and who I was and how I carried myself. And I'm honored to be named as his friend. Up to date, my brother-in-law is in the prison where he's at right now. My family went to see my brother-in-law this weekend, and they had the pleasure of meeting Leonard out on a visit. And so I just want everyone to know that he is a man worth fighting for. And thank you.
Thank
taking
you,
the time to
Samuel.
listen.
Welcome home, my friend.
Thank
Thank you so much.
Samuel.
And Samuel, you know, Sundiata's home now too.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to track him down.
Actually,
Well,
Samuel,
Samuel, put your email in the thing, and I'm in touch with him through Jericho, and I'll try and get you a number for him.
Okay.
So put your email in the chat, or if Kimberly and them know how to get a hold of you, let me know afterwards, and I'll
Well,
see what I
well,
can.
Kimberly can get in contact with
I
me.
have his information. I also wanted to add something. It's Leonard also wanted his contact information to soon.
I know, I'm on that.
Okay, thank you, Colette.
Andrew has his hand up.
Uh,
Go ahead, Andrew.
Samuel said he would like to do stuff with Leonard Peltier. Samuel, my name's Andrew. I actually have a petition I've been working on for the past 5 years, I believe, and
Yes.
to been calling for President Biden and, of course, President at the time to grant clemency to Leonard, and I think it's around 68,000 signatures. I'm trying to.
And you can have my signature also.
All right, I'll put a link
Just
to a
tell me
link.
what,
So you can,
yeah, tell me what I got to do and you have my signature.
okay. Yeah, I'll put a link in the description or the chat.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you. And it'll be an honor for me.
Thank you.
Samuel, would you mind if I gave you a phone call?
Excuse me?
Would you mind if I gave you a phone call?
No problem. Thank you.
Okay, okay. Wanted to ask your permission first. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here tonight. And I would have been here last week, but I got caught up in some things and but I'm here tonight, and I will be here as often as I possibly can.
We are honored to have you.
Thank you so
Does
much.
anybody else have questions for Samuel or Paulette? Or any observations on the chapters?
So what did people think about the chapter?
I was
Kimberly.
just absolutely stunned
Kimberly.
at what they got away with and what they continue to get away with.
Right.
I mean, I've been reading through the documents that you put online. I've been studying the crap out of them. And the fact that they are still getting away with it. What can we do about that?
Miss Catherine, what do you have to say?
Except draw attention to it.
Yeah,
I try
Oh.
hard to thank the people that are pressuring the White House. Nobody throws a fit when someone does something good. The Democratic National Committee is pressuring the White House. And so I ask people to write letters.
I just wanted to bring out the fact that Special Agent Price has been lying the whole time. And every time there's been a witness, it seems like he and his partner were always involved with private conversations with the witnesses, threatening them. And the fact that even though he still won't admit that he did anything to Anna Mae, when her family were asking for her hands, Kimberly and I brought this up when we were talking about it earlier, that Special Agent Price, when they wanted her hands, went to his car and got her hands. They were in a jar in his possession, and gave them her hands back so she could be buried traditionally. And I don't see how he got away with holding her hands all this time and nobody arrested him or even questioned why he had them in his car.
Well, he had them in his car because they were sent back to him from Washington, D.C. You see, they weren't supposed to be able to identify her. But once the hands were sent to D.C., that was a whole nother system. And they were the ones in D.C. that identified Annie Mae and then notified her sister and her children. But if it had been the way Price wanted it, the hands would never have gone to the FBI. But they got sent there, and so the FBI did what it was supposed to do. It identified her. And that way, it made it clear that something had happened to her that was not what they had said for the first autopsy. And so it actually worked against him to have had her hands. But they're given back to Bruce. And Bruce takes them to the place where then they're put in her coffin with her.
He ordered her buried immediately as a Jane Doe. Even the coroner at Pine Ridge said, what's
Right.
the big deal? It's a dead Indian. We have a dead Indian every day. But they
Right.
wanted her buried immediately as a Jane Doe.
And it was in the first they had her cause of death was exposure, I believe. And then in the second autopsy, they saw what appeared to be a bullet hole. So they did a further autopsy. And so, I mean, that just shows the incompetence right there. If they
So
can't
there
even,
was blood in the snow that everybody was pointing out. But Price
But
was saying, no, don't look
she
at that.
was not found for like 8 days. And so even with the bullet wound, it was they say it was a 38. It might not have killed her, but being exposed for that long of time in sub-zero weather and snowed on and everything, she actually froze to death. You know, she was frozen when they found her. It wasn't like she was just laying there. She had been in that environment for 8 days during a snowstorm. And so, yeah, she was shot, but she was also left there, you know, and froze to death probably before the bullet killed her.
yeah. Well,
Also, I know in the first autopsy, they didn't mention anything about her being beaten or raped, but on the second autopsy, they found out that she had been brutally raped also.
But
And
they don't, but see, they try and pin that on the people that they say killed her. But Bruce and them say no, that what they say is she supposedly, there's no proof that she was raped. There was proof that she had had intercourse before she was killed. But Bruce said, if you read the autopsy, there's nothing in it that says it was a violent act. And so he said what they did was that way, was try to make it like whoever killed her was this vicious person, and it turned out to be an Indian man. But Bruce said that that was something that they added to make it even more heinous, but that was not the reality. And even in that autopsy, they say there was a possibility, but there was no evidence that she had actually been raped.
We still don't know that it was an Indian man that killed her.
No. Well,
Price was the
two
one that was
Indian men were
gunning for her.
charged and convicted,
Yes,
and John Boy is fighting, and he just had a major hearing around extradition from Canada, which he's fighting, and that's there was a hearing on that, and I don't know if they've come back with whether or not they're going to try and do anything about it. But he's in Sioux Falls, in the men's prison there in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And Arlo is out. Arlo is
oh, is
back
he?
on the street. Yeah, Arlo only did like 3.5 years
Oh, wow.
because he made some kind of agreement to testify against John. And so by testifying against John, they cut his sentence down.
I did not know that.
Mhm.
Any other remarks, questions for Paulette or for Samuel or for David?
Or any questions about those chapters? Because those chapters
There were
are
a lot in those chapters.
jumped up.
I thought the car exploding, them telling that farmer it was a bunch of canned food that went bad. I like that. That was some very powerful canned bad food.
And if you ever see, you can find it if you look. I haven't seen in one of the movies about Leonard, there's a picture of it. And you know those sardine cans that have that old key?
Yeah,
And you wound it up? That's
Yeah.
what looks like his station wagon. The top is just like in big circles around that. And that's how Bob developed adult epilepsy, because he had this piece of metal stuck in his eye. And so they had to take his eye out to clean that area and take the metal out of his eyeball. And so after they reattached it, all that scar tissue behind it in his head caused some serious brain damage. And that's what epilepsy is, you know, when the neurons can't get through. And so that's one of the things that caused Bob to develop onset epilepsy, which was much later. I mean, this was when he was out, but it takes a long time to develop that because the scar tissue is so intense.
yeah. I try to tweet
Paulette, is
all
that-
these little things just to bring public awareness, and everybody's like, huh? They actually did that? I mean, people can't believe this stuff.
Paulette, is that what happened to him? Did he have an epileptic seizure and hit his head? Is that what happened to him?
Yes, he was in Spain, and he fell out of bed, is what they suppose.
Yeah, that's
And when he
disputed.
did, he hit his head and there was nobody there with him to get him up. One of the last times I saw him, we were up at his brother's house, and that happened, but we heard it and people got to him right away and got him up. But when it happened in Spain, he was by himself. And of course, there's all kind of conspiracy theories about that, who took Bob out and things like that. So, but we don't really know, but we know he had a seizure.
Well, if anybody else has any comments to make, if not, it's that went pretty quickly. We've been here an hour, but I just wanted to, again, just take a moment just to honor Annie Mae and her work in the movement and her life, and just thank you all for coming in. Thank you, Paulette, for your very valuable.
Well, you know, we should also, if we're going to honor Annie Mae, you should also think about Myrtle.
Myrtle too.
And as
I agree.
deadly as that was, the heinous actions against her, and how the FBI felt they could use a woman and intimidate her and threaten her and everything, you know, that just speaks to what they're willing to do. If any of us have, you know, family members that have that capacity, you know how terrible that must be. And then to have somebody who's supposed to be a protector of you use you and just throw you away afterwards.
Exactly.
It was, you know, horrifying for her. And I always think, you know, what would have happened, you know, even if she wasn't, what kind of resistance is there against the FBI?
Exactly.
The brother in Seattle was the only one that really was able to withstand their pressure, and that's because he had strong family. He's related to Steve Robidoux.
Wait,
And they had,
what was that again? I just missed the last part of it.
that's the young man that was in Washington.
Yes.
In Washington State. Not Joe, but the other one that they go up and they try and intimidate him and he refuses. And so they take him off the list.
Yeah.
The art room is open again, and Leonard could use money put on his books for art supplies. We're gonna put that out in the newsletter. There's a certain way that you have to get money to the BOP. I think it's a post a money order. I'll look it up.
I'll post a link to the information. You have to also identify his name and his number and all that.
Yeah.
I've been tweeting it, but yeah, he could probably, some of the paints he said were dried up, but he was happy to have some colors, but it would be sure nice to get him some paints. And now that the art room's open again.
I'll look for your tweet and I'll retweet it.
Well, yeah, and you can also get the information on how to write a prisoner or send them money off the Jericho website.
Okay.
You go to Leonard on the political prisoner page and it tells you exactly how you have to do it. You don't send a letter. You have to, if you're going to do it by mail, you can only use a US money order. You have to get it from the post office, but you can go to Walmart. I send him money through Walmart all the time. So you can do it through Walmart, and I'm not sure, some of the federal systems now take JPay, but I'm not sure
Western
if
Union also.
Coleman, huh?
Western Union also.
Yes.
Right. But JPay is getting into more and more federal penitentiaries too.
Oh, they have JPay
So
in
there's
federal
2 or
prison now?
3 ways you can send him money.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll definitely put that out in the newsletter. And don't forget www.whitehouse.gov/contact. You can email the president 24/7 and ask him to free Leonard. And the phone number is 202-456-1111. That phone lines are open from Tuesday through Thursday, 11 to 3 p.m. So just
Thank you, Kimberly,
When
for
you
getting
can't
us all
sleep at
together.
night, get up and email the president.
yes, let's do it. Student, Scoden. Thank you all for coming in. Paulette, it's been a pleasure. You're always so wonderful.
It's
and you're-
always great to see everybody. Bye.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Samuel.
Kimberly,
Bye,
for bringing
David.
us all together.
Thank you all for
Oh,
having
no
me.
problem. Love
Nice
you all.
meeting you, Samuel. Good night, my people.
Good night,
Nice
everyone.
meeting you, Samuel.
Yes,
too.
come
Thank
back,
you.
everyone.
I'll definitely be back
night.
again.